The wedding guests whispered behind their smiles as the bride walked toward the simplest ceremony anyone in town had ever witnessed. They laughed at her decision, convinced she had thrown away her future by marrying the poorest man they knew. His worn-out shoes, faded shirt, and quiet nature made him an easy target for cruel judgments. But none of them noticed the silent tears in his eyes as he looked at her. None of them knew the truth hidden beneath his humble appearance. And when that truth finally came to light months later, the entire town would be forced to confront the shame of judging a man by what he owned instead of who he truly was. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel, Ripple of Kindness too. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Morning sunlight poured over the peaceful little town of Ashbrook, painting the narrow streets with golden light as people hurried through another ordinary day. The baker opened his shop before sunrise, children laughed on their way to school, and neighbors exchanged polite greetings while quietly discussing everyone else's lives. It was a town where rumors traveled faster than truth, and appearances often mattered more than character. Among the townspeople lived a young woman named Maren Holloway. She worked long hours at the local library, carefully organizing shelves, repairing damaged books, and helping children discover the joy of reading. Her paycheck was small, but her heart was rich with kindness. Ever since losing both parents in a tragic accident several years earlier, she had learned that happiness could never be measured by money alone. She believed every person carried unseen struggles and deserved respect, even when the rest of the world looked away. On the opposite side of town lived a quiet man named Rowan Mercer. Everyone simply called him the poorest man in Ashbrook. He rented a tiny wooden cabin that barely stood against strong winds. His clothes were patched so many times that nobody remembered their original color. Every morning he accepted whatever temporary work he could find, whether repairing fences, cleaning gardens, carrying heavy boxes, or helping elderly neighbors without expecting payment. Although many people took advantage of his generosity, Rowan never complained. He smiled softly, finished every task with care, and disappeared before anyone could thank him properly. Most people assumed he had always been poor because they had never seen anything different. Children sometimes mocked him without understanding the pain their words caused. Shopkeepers occasionally refused him service until they were sure he could pay. Even adults who considered themselves respectable crossed the street rather than greet him. Rowan accepted every insult with remarkable patience, carrying burdens no one could see. Maren first noticed Rowan during a heavy rainstorm one spring morning. An elderly woman slipped while carrying groceries, sending bags rolling across the flooded sidewalk. Dozens of people watched from nearby storefronts without moving. Rowan rushed through the rain, gathered every scattered item, helped the woman to her feet, walked her safely home, and quietly left before she could reward him. Maren witnessed everything from the library window. Something about his selfless kindness stayed with her long after the rain had stopped. Over the following weeks, she began noticing similar moments everywhere. Rowan fixed broken bicycles for children who could not afford repairs. He chopped firewood for widows before winter arrived. He spent his few dollars buying bread for stray animals rather than purchasing something better for himself. Every act of goodness seemed invisible because he never sought attention. Gradually, Maren began speaking with him whenever their paths crossed. Their conversations were simple but sincere. They talked about old books, changing seasons, wildflowers growing near the river, and dreams that survived even difficult circumstances. Rowan possessed quiet wisdom that surprised her. Despite living with almost nothing, he carried no bitterness. His eyes reflected peace that wealth alone could never purchase. The town quickly noticed their growing friendship. Gossip spread through cafes, grocery stores, and church gatherings. People warned Maren she was making a terrible mistake by spending time with someone who could never provide a comfortable future. Friends encouraged her to meet successful businessmen instead. Even distant relatives questioned her judgment, insisting love could never survive poverty. But Marin had learned something most people never understood. Character revealed itself when no one was watching. Rowan had already proven himself richer in compassion than many wealthy people in Ashbrook. Months later, Rowan nervously asked Marin to marry him beneath an old oak tree overlooking the river where they often spent quiet evenings together. He offered no expensive ring, only a small silver band carefully polished until it shined in the fading sunlight. His hands trembled because he feared she deserved far more than he could ever give. Marin accepted without hesitation. She saw not the patched clothing or empty wallet but the gentle soul standing before her. She believed a peaceful home built on honesty would always be stronger than a mansion built on pride. Their wedding was modest, held on a bright summer morning beneath clear blue skies. Wildflowers decorated handmade wooden benches. Friends from the library attended alongside elderly neighbors Rowan had quietly helped over the years. Yet many townspeople came only out of curiosity, whispering cruel comments behind polite smiles. They pitted Marin for marrying a man they believed had nothing. After the ceremony, the newlyweds returned to Rowan's tiny cabin. It contained only basic furniture, aging walls, and a roof that leaked whenever storms arrived. Life was not easy. They stretched every dollar carefully. Some evenings they shared one simple meal because it was all they could afford. Marin continued working at the library while Rowan accepted every honest job available. Together they repaired broken furniture, planted vegetables behind the cabin, and found happiness in simple moments that wealth could never replace. Still, hardship tested them constantly. Bills accumulated faster than income. Winter approached with freezing winds that slipped through cracks in the cabin walls. Rowan often pretended he had already eaten so Marin would enjoy the last portion of soup. She secretly mended his clothes while he slept because buying new ones remained impossible. Despite everything, neither allowed suffering to destroy their kindness. Every Sunday they prepared extra food for lonely neighbors. Whenever someone needed help moving furniture or repairing a fence, Rowan volunteered immediately. Marin organized free reading sessions for local children whose families could not afford books. Their generosity puzzled many people because they seemed to have so little themselves. Unknown to everyone in Ashbrook, Rowan guarded an extraordinary secret. Years earlier, he had belonged to one of the wealthiest families in the country. His father had built a successful manufacturing company worth millions of dollars. Rowan grew up surrounded by luxury, expensive schools, and endless opportunities. But after his parents died unexpectedly, greedy relatives fought over the inheritance. Corruption, betrayal, and false accusations nearly destroyed the family business. Heartbroken, Rowan walked away from everything. He wanted to discover whether genuine goodness still existed beyond wealth and influence. Disguising his identity completely, he settled in Ashbrook with only enough money to survive modestly. He decided that if someone ever loved him, it would be for his heart rather than his fortune. Only one elderly lawyer knew the truth. Before passing away, Rowan's father had created a legal trust stating that his son would receive complete ownership of the family's restored company only after spending several years living independently, proving his integrity and compassion without relying on inherited wealth. Rowan honored that wish faithfully, never revealing his past. Nearly a year after the wedding, a black luxury car quietly entered Ashbrook one sunny afternoon. Curious neighbors gathered as professionally dressed visitors approached Rowan's humble cabin carrying sealed documents. The entire street watched from windows and porches, expecting some misunderstanding. Instead, Rowan calmly welcomed the visitors inside. Hours later, astonishing news spread across town. Rowan Mercer was not an ordinary laborer at all. He was the rightful owner of an international company recently restored after years of legal battles. His inheritance included businesses, charitable foundations, farmland, and investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The town stood frozen in disbelief. People who had ignored him suddenly remembered his kindness. Those who once mocked him now claimed they had always respected him. Invitations arrived daily. Business owners offered partnerships. Wealthy families hoped to become close friends. Even relatives who had criticized Marin suddenly praised her wisdom. But neither Rowan nor Marin allowed success to change their hearts. Instead of purchasing enormous mansions or expensive luxuries, they renovated the old cabin while preserving its simple charm. Rowan reopened abandoned factories, creating hundreds of honest jobs with fair wages. Marin expanded the town library, adding children's learning centers, scholarships, and literacy programs for struggling families. They established a foundation supporting widows, veterans, foster children, and elderly residents forgotten by society. Every decision reflected the compassion they had practiced long before wealth returned. One winter evening, Rowan quietly visited the same elderly woman he had helped during the rainstorm years earlier. Her house had become unsafe, and she feared losing it forever. Without announcing his identity or expecting recognition, Rowan arranged complete repairs, paid every outstanding bill, and ensured she could live comfortably for the rest of her life. When neighbors asked who had performed such an incredible act of generosity, the elderly woman smiled through grateful tears because she already knew the answer. True kindness never changed, regardless of how much money someone possessed. The people of Ashbrook slowly realized the greatest lesson of all. Rowan had not become generous because he became wealthy. He had been generous while everyone believed he was poor. Money simply gave him greater opportunities to express the goodness already living inside him. Marin often reflected on the day she accepted the simple silver ring beneath the old oak tree. Many believed she had sacrificed her future. In reality, she had chosen something far more valuable than riches. She had chosen integrity, humility, and unconditional love. The fortune that later arrived was only a beautiful bonus. Her greatest treasure had always been the man standing beside her. Years later, visitors from distant towns came to Ashbrook wondering why the community felt so different from neighboring places. They noticed neighbors helping one another without expecting rewards. They saw children learning kindness through example rather than lectures. They discovered businesses treating workers with dignity instead of greed. Few understood that the transformation began with one woman who refused to judge a man by his worn clothing and one man who never allowed hardship to steal his compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness too. Every interaction helps these messages of hope reach someone who may desperately need them today. Cherry Blossom special request, please comment below with the words, "Kindness always reveals the truth," if you believe a person's heart is worth more than their wealth. As the sun set over Ashbrook one peaceful evening, Rowan and Marin stood together outside their once humble home, watching children laugh beneath the same golden sky that had witnessed both their struggles and their triumphs. They understood something the world often forgot. Real wealth was never counted in bank accounts, expensive homes, or luxury cars. It was measured by the lives touched, the tears wiped away, the hope restored, and the love shared without conditions. The people who once laughed at the poorest man in town would forever remember the day they discovered that the richest heart had been living among them all along, quietly proving that kindness is the greatest treasure anyone can ever possess.